All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Emily Sprenger. I'm an academic trainer in the Center for Teaching and Learning, and we are thrilled to be able to help host our first Pride Celebration webinar with one of our very own Dr. Gary Walker-Roberts and Dr. Maggie Broderick. Both of our faculty members come from the School of Education and bring our very first Pride webinar. We're excited to have you all here. So as I mentioned, Emily Sprenger, academic trainer, my pronouns are she, her, and just a couple of very brief housekeeping items. We want you to have questions popped in the Q&A function of your Zoom. And we do have a few Mentimeters coming up, so get ready to participate. It's going to be interactive. We're excited to have that as a feature in this presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Dr. Gary Walker-Roberts as we dive into You've Earned an A+, celebrating the second A in the acronym LGBTQIAA++, allyship at its finest. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone, and happy Pride. Just as Emily said, my name is Dr. Gary Walker-Roberts, and I go by the gender pronouns they, them, and theirs. Emily, it's wonderful to be here today to have this presentation and kick off Pride. And just as I promised, you have earned an A+, all of you allies out there. So congratulations. And I look forward to today's presentation. We're going to take you through a wonderful presentation on what we've done right, what we could do better, how to be an ally, what's the difference between ally and allyship. And then we're going to do some role playing and go over to Mentimeter, like Emily said, and have some involvement. And then at the end, we'll go through some discussions. I also am thrilled to partner this year with one of my faves. She is absolutely fantastic. She was my chair for my dissertation. She is a colleague now, and I am so proud to be able to call her a friend. She's going to help me present this presentation today. So I'd like to kick it over to Dr. Maggie.
Oh, thanks, Dr. Gary, and thanks, Emily. I'm Dr. Maggie Broderick. Pronouns are she, her. And I am a faculty member in the School of Education. Over there, I like to wear a lot of different hats. That's just sort of how I roll. I am a chair. I was Dr. Gary's chair for dissertations, and a specialization lead and an instructor, a professor. And I do roles in curriculum and assessment. So I kind of have a lot of hats, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, thinking about allyship. But yeah, I'm just thrilled to be here. And I thank you all for being here today, especially during Pride Month. Thank you. So yeah, we see here about safe zones, and I've been around for a few decades, and I've seen a lot of societal change. I think probably a lot of us have, a lot of people probably have. And honestly, just a little while ago, it was less common to be an ally. I was talking with my son yesterday about this, and it seems pretty common. You see merchandise, you see people saying I'm an ally now, but really it wasn't that long ago when that was not the case. And when being an ally was actually more of a risk somebody would take than perhaps in 2022. And as an ally, I want to say I'm in the background. I'm standing behind the others. So I'm here to support those who are marginalized, who actually would face harm, even today, who actually would have negative outcomes, perhaps in our culture. And so allies are here to help set the tone and to move that needle forward. And I always think of it sort of like, you're just there to say, if something needs to change, you speak up, you speak out. I think of it sort of as being a supporting role, because the people in the acronym who really are marginalized and need our support, that's who we're supporting. So when we think about safe zones, that's the idea of this, that it's true in life, and that's also true in this webinar. Emily is moderating the webinar, and we encourage you to join the discussion, the Q&A, put questions in the Q&A. And it's a safe zone where we're supportive, and we're trying to make sure to push that needle forward and to really, get in the same page and work together for good change. So this is where allies come in. We say something safe, we build trust, we make sure people feel comfortable, we make sure to set the culture, and if something's going wrong, we speak out. language evolves, the acronym evolves, things change, culture changes. And so you can think about your own role in life and how you can actually be a part of that change, which we're going to talk about more later.
All right. So thank you, Dr. Broderick. And I think you hit the nail on the head, right? We're community, we're coming together. The LGBTQIAA++ group, our community is that of a minority group. So we are a small subset of population as a whole. So we do lean on our allies to help us to really get out there to educate, to say something. If you see something, say something, to be that advocate for us. But I want to talk about Happy Month of Pride with the rainbow colors. It makes you feel good. And there's a backstory. Pride became historic because of what happened in the New York City bar called Stonewall. So Stonewall is a bar that's in New York City, and that's where our community came together for camaraderie, for celebrations, to lean on each other. And what happened was the police continuously harassed our group. And one day, one of the trans girls that was at the Stonewall Inn was so fed up with it, she threw a shot glass at the mirror and boom, it made this huge loud sound. And it was dubbed the shot glass that was thrown by Marsha P. Johnson as a trans woman of color, as the shot glass heard around the world. It started this spark of advocacy, education, and rioting to really make sure that we have our rights as LGBTQIAA++ people. And I also want to say that education is a big part of it. And we have been doing these webinar series now for almost 5 years. I'm so proud of them. I put all of the webinar series here on this slide so that you could use it as a backup, as a piece, as a great ally to go in and watch some of these webinars to really get familiar with the LGBTQIA+ community. And the first one is the historical context, right? So it was the shot glass that was heard around the world. The second one was spilling the tea on all things transgender. It was a really fun one, and I have some celebrities in that one in that webinar that came out to really help me present there. Last year we did From Pandemic to Pansexual. We unpacked the + in the acronym, and then also Dr. Broderick and I did a wonderful ed break with VASC, which we talked about honoring identity and agency in the Zoom room. And if you look, you can see that we have our pronouns after our name, which signals to everybody in the Zoom room what we prefer to go by with our pronouns. So that's something that I really want to encourage, but have fun, get involved this month. Let's start with the acronym LGBTQIAA++. And just as Dr. Maggie said, it's always evolving, it's always growing. We are a call-in group that we want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable and that everybody has space that they can share with us. So as you can see, we have lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans folks, questioning, and queer. So there is a dual meaning for the Q. I is intersex, A is asexual, and A is allies. Now, there is one thing that I would like to point out here. There is a dual meaning for the A. And if you look at the other presentations that I've done, I've grouped the A as a dual meaning for allies and asexual. But I want to say this first and foremost. I was going by the Burgess et al. That states LGBTQIA stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, and asexual allied. So that's where we got the title and the description for our webinar. However, there were some really great call outs and call-ins for me and Dr. B and Emily about this webinar today. So we took it upon ourselves and we started doing research and we engaged with the students and faculty. And we came up with another resource that's from Lee in 2021 that states the second A stands for ally, a term that describes a person who actively supports the LGBT community. So we actually this year decided, after all of the conversations, the growth, and using that growth mindset, we separated the A out. And we want to just say thank you to the scholars out there and to our allies and to those who are family that belong to the LGBTQIAA++ to really help us move the needle as well. And I think that's all about a growth mindset. And we were able to really set the example for that. So we welcome all, have fun. The others are the plus, and they are other identities such as two-spirit, but you will see that sometimes in the acronym is 2S or gender nonconforming. Here's the other thing I wanted to say about this. As Dr. Maggie said, language is changing, evolving, acronyms will change, grow. And I've heard it referred to as the alphabet soup or the alphabet cereal, but it's important as we start to, use labels. We wish we could get away from labels, but we want to feel connected and supported. So you'll see it continue to grow. And in some, you can even see here in some scholarly peer-reviewed journals, for example, Burgess, they just use LGBTQIA. And Lee, they used LGBTQ. So you'll see it, the acronym used differently, but it doesn't have anything to do with trying to leave anybody out. Everybody is included, and we want to make sure that if you read a journal and they don't have LGBTQIAA++, we still want to call you into that conversation. And call you into that conversation, we do want to do, and we give you a straight ally flag that you can fly proudly. As you can see, it has the A in the center with the rainbow colors, and then the black and white stripes behind it. So if you see this on a bumper sticker, or you see somebody with a t-shirt with this flag, that means that they are an ally and probably are creating a safe space for you. So I just love this, that we have even given our straight allies a flag of their own. And just as I promised, we're going to talk about what we've done well, and then maybe where we can move the needle or bend the arc toward more of an equity, diversity, and inclusion environment. So the first and foremost, my favorite, I would love to talk about former President Barack Obama. Barack Obama is one of the biggest allies for the LGBTQ community. And look, on Newsweek, on the cover, yes, they gave him a gay halo. And I do have that cover right here. I ran out and bought many, many copies of it. This is so dear to me. And he is one of my biggest favorite allies. And he said, I would like to do a little quote for you. Obama said, "Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like any other or anyone else under the law." I think that's pretty amazing that he was able to take that step. And also the headline was pretty interesting to me. The headline in the magazine says, the president of the United States shifted the mainstream in one interview. So he shifted the whole conversation for a whole culture in one conversation, because in 2007, he did not believe in gay marriage. And then he obviously changed because marriage equality happened in June 15th. So again, demonstrating that growth mindset and how you can shift and become more of a stronger ally. I also would like to say that it starts with leadership, right? So he was the leader, and just having these conversations and calling in people to have conversations at the White House. You could see the New Yorker put the columns as the LGBTQIAA++, to symbolize his solidarity with the community. Marriage equality happened in June, so what a great way to celebrate. I got married in June in 2015 as well. So once we got that freedom to marry and that equality across the nation, my husband and I took the opportunity to celebrate that way. Also before that though, under Obama's leadership and administration, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy for the military was repealed in December 2010. And then also he included trans people first ever, which is big, as we talked about language mattering, that, the SOTU speech, right, the State of the Union speech in January 15th. There is another great fact sheet, so you can capture that when we release this in the Center for Teaching and Learning. And you can go look at all of the great things that President Obama and our allies did for the LGBTQIAA++ community. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. Dr. Broderick, I'll let you jump in too if you'd like to talk about any time frame there or under President Obama's leadership.
Oh, thanks so much, Dr. Gary. I just think it's really, really interesting to consider, my whole lifetime, which is more than a few decades at this point, and all the change that has occurred. And that's a huge part of that.
Awesome. And again, like just really demonstrating that growth mindset and calling people into the room, right? So President Obama had one of the first ever summits through the Department of Education with trans students, and went on to do big things with the bathroom bill and things of that nature. So check out that fact sheet and just see how equity, diversity, inclusion minded that administration was and President Obama. And speaking of Dr. Maggie, the next slide is all about allyship. And, she has been one of the biggest supporters that I have been able to work with over the last few years and just blew me away with everything that she does for the community. And so I asked Dr. Broderick to come on with me today and really take that seat of the ally and really talk about allyship and at its finest and what the process was. So I thought we'd go ahead and do a little bit of an interview with you, if you don't mind, Dr. Broderick.
Sounds great.
Awesome. So the first thing I want to ask you is, who's in this lovely photo of yours?
Oh, thank you. Well, this was pre-pandemic. As you can see, it was a 20th anniversary tour of Rent. I'm a huge musical lover. And so are many people in my family, and that's my son. And so we're going to talk a little bit later about that as well. But yeah, that's us going to Rent a while back.
Awesome. Can you recall like the first time that you ever heard the word gay or queer or anything of that nature in your childhood?
Sure. Well, when I think back, I was a teenager in the 80s. So thinking about that era, I think a lot about AIDS. It's really incredibly formative for me as somebody who was, coming of age at that time. And you'd see that in the news and you would hear stories, and there was a lot of confusion and misinformation and disinformation and just a lot going on, and both, sort of in the national news and sort of locally as you would talk to people. And I even remember going to like a church basement meeting and talking to people about that, being perhaps 15 or 16. And I remember not really knowing much at all. Like I know a little bit more today. We all know a little bit more today, but not knowing much, maybe knowing that there were gay men, that what we would say today, cisgender gay men existed. I kind of knew that, but it wasn't talked about a whole lot. But then you'd heard about AIDS and I started to learn. And my family had just taught me, like I'm sure a lot of people, just to be a good person, just to be an empathetic, compassionate, caring person, just to be somebody who would think about somebody else's perspective and put yourself in their shoes. And so when AIDS happened and I saw that unfolding, I was 15, 16 and thinking about it and understood that was, a thing to have empathy about and a thing to really think about. And just started to realize that really was very pivotal for me, I would say.
Awesome. That's great. And then you even went on to do research, and I was really impressed when I was your student and read your research, and you and I have presented on it. So what is something that you're most proud of as an ally that you've accomplished thus far?
Well, it's really that growth mindset that I think you're going to talk about in a little bit, Dr. Gary. Like, I've been through quite a journey. Like I said, in the 80s, a lot of us just didn't know much. We just didn't. And we learned more. We learned, other parts of the acronym and other nuances and how identities aren't just one thing. It's not just, just gay. It could be all kinds of things, gender and sexuality, all of these things. And everybody's an individual and there's a lot of nuance. And the most pivotal thing, honestly, is fast forwarding to the last few years when my son came out as transgender. And during that time, you were my student. So I was their chair. I was Dr. Gary's chair. And it was really, really helpful for me to have Dr. Gary's open and wonderful perspective and just ability to talk about these things when I was going through that as a parent of a transgender child who was coming out. And so I think, just having someone that is an ally, whether they're gay, straight, otherwise anything, any of these different things with gender and sexuality, just knowing you can talk to them, for me, that is, in my most recent experience, the most important thing.
Wonderful. And that brings us to the next slide, like your perspective. I would love to hear your perspective, any words of wisdom that you'd like to give other allies out there. But yeah, I'll give you that opportunity.
Oh, thanks. Well, here we are. This was just, I don't know, a few short weeks ago, Dr. Gary. And I got to be behind you putting the faculty sash on you. And we were so happy in San Diego at commencement in our regalia. And so this is one part of me, but like I said, I wear a lot of hats. And I think a lot of our students at NCU do as well. A lot of my students are parents and they're community leaders and they're teachers and, you know, all kinds of things. And so I do a lot of things. I write curricula. I think about, you know, things in scholarly works that I do, presentations and publications, all kinds of things with my parenting. I'm a Girl Scout leader. I've been a Girl Scout leader for a large number of years, like 8 years. Working in the schools, I used to be a K-12 teacher. I've mentored teachers, but basically, in a nutshell, whatever I'm doing at those hats, I bring in this other hat, which is really important of being an ally. I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm doing a Girl Scout meeting and maybe there's a girl who's questioning and wants to talk to me about that, or if I'm a professor or a dissertation chair, or if I'm writing a scholarly publication and I'm thinking about bias on my part and other people's parts, for example, and I try to bring in that hat and think, okay, put myself in that person's shoes. What would it be like to be in a marginalized group of any sort? And I particularly think about this group as well. It's near and dear to my heart, and just in general, being a good person and infusing that into whatever your station in life might be, whatever it is you do in life, just infusing that other hat of allyship into what you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. And I think you continuously beat to the drum of this growth mindset. So the first step in becoming a strong ally is being a lifelong learner, recognizing that, and then applying that growth mindset. Now, I talked about Obama, but I want to also talk about some things that I would give an F-, if you will, around the country. Like, it's not all glorious and glamour. And this month it may be rainbows and unicorns, but I just want to bring up a couple of things that are happening around our country. So, you know, certainly, I would like to talk about the Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, right? That's hot off the press. And you can't say gay in the educational arena in the state of Florida. So they need our support. It is HB 1557. Get in the know, really look that up. What does that mean? I always talk about as well that, you know, homosexuality, like what a word, right? And I always change the word to homo-legality. I would rather you see the love within our community versus the other, which is fine too. I have my bachelor's in gender and sexuality studies, so I love to talk about that as well. But you know, we have a society that's really focused on hypersexualizing everything, and I want to talk about that homo-legality, right? And so, interesting enough, the Don't Say Gay bill, there is a speech that one of our colleagues, Dr. Amy Lynn, brought up to me and said, hey, Gary, did you see the speech at commencement, at a high school commencement? And I said he didn't. So I ran to Google and I looked and I watched the speech, and he changed gay to curly haired person, which I absolutely love. So he used that throughout the speech. Go ahead and Google it. And I'll talk about that a little bit later too, about, you know, it is incumbent upon us to be the navigator of our own education when it comes to cultural nuances. So like I said, Googled it. Google is my best friend. You could run to Google and just look up everything. I kind of give Google an A+, but maybe Wikipedia, start there, a little bit of an F-, but you certainly can start there and then work and build your way from that platform. Also, there's a Texas anti-trans law. So in February 2022, the governor stated that parents providing gender-affirming medical procedures to trans children is child abuse under the state law. So again, another just point where, another fact where we are really getting an F- in some areas around the United States of America. And we need to really enlist your help, your advocacy, to really get in the know. And how can you be an advocate? How can you be an ally across border lines? So that's something that I wanted to really talk about. And again, Barack Obama had a little bit of a fixed mindset in 2007. And then as he really interacted with people from the community and heard stories, he changed. And I think, that many, many people can. And that's why we ask for your allyship. Go into things with a growth mindset. Something that's very common now in all of our arenas is certainly gender pronouns. And so watch the webinar that Dr. Broderick and I did on gender pronouns, and Google gender pronouns and why do they matter, and how can you be an ally in really recognizing gender pronouns for people and the way that they want to identify. So, but we want to talk about listen, love, ask questions, be curious, educate yourself, and share stories of others. So Dr. Broderick, would you like to talk about listening?
Sure. Well, Dr. Gary knows that I always will take every opportunity to geek out just a touch. And I mean, just a touch right here, but my background's in linguistics and things like that in language. And when we think about listening, it's really not just that word listen. There's so much more. There's your body language. There's nonverbal cues. There are ways that you say with your words that you're listening. If you hear someone and you say, or active listening, sort of trying to repeat what they've said. And that is actually listening instead of just, hearing, which is just your ears, right? Listening involves a lot more. And I could go on and on, but I won't geek out too much, Dr. Gary.
Oh, I love it. I think it's just active listening and just, making sure that people are feeling heard. Love, right? We love to spread the love. Always ensure you're coming from a place of love. And I always talk about this too, because, in the growth mindset, you can kind of see it on the left-hand column here in the margin. You have the mind that's rainbow for growth, and then fixed is dark. I like to talk about your heart growth set, right? Like be growth heart set. Let your heart do the leading. Really, if you feel compassionate and love, then you're more apt to change. If your heart is fixed and it's dark, then you're more apt to do things out of spite and just be mean. And unfortunately, there are people out there that are that way. But we want to be that ray of light and really show the love and learn. And so I think that's very important to make sure that your heart is definitely on that growth path to absorb more. I think we can win more with love. Love, is love. And I think it's important to really show that to each other, amongst each other. And I like to talk about calling in instead of calling out. Like, where is that in the growth mindset? Is that coming from a good place of your heart or a bad place in your heart, right? Like, how do you have those conversations? And I know that it is a teeter-totter. It's a yin and yang. It is, the scales. How do you balance that scale where it's like, okay, enough is enough. You've misgendered me about 7 times and I've given you 3 years to really work on that. Let's sit down and have a conversation. It still can come out of a place of love and really understanding, like, what's going on? Is it because you don't love me or you don't want to show love for me? So I think each conversation can certainly have that moment of love. Ask questions. Be curious. And, I really would love Dr. B to go over this one, but the be curious, I think I'm hearing a lot from people. They're like, I'm scared. I'm scared to be wrong. I'm scared to ask a question. I'm scared right now to be called out. And I talk about this because it does make you feel like you're walking on eggshells, but we have to give room for people to grow and to learn and to be corrected. And if I may give a quick example, like I am gender nonconforming and I earned my PhD, so you can call me doctor, not Mr. And people in the South are very, very polite and they love to call me sir. And I know it's coming from a place of respect and that's the way they grew up. And sir is natural right out of their mouth. And so some of my students are like, oh, yes, sir, I'll do that, sir. And it's coming from a place of respect. And I just say, oh, just you could use Mr. because I'm sorry, doctor, because I'm non-conforming. And they will quickly just say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I'll say, no harm, no foul. We'll just move forward. And then they just call me doctor from there on out. So I think it's really okay to come in and just give some of that moment to reset, readjust, and correct themselves. So I'll let you speak as well, Dr. Broderick.
Well, I just love how that builds on listen and love, Dr. Gary. So like listening, humans do this. It's more than just hearing. There's a lot involved in listening. Love comes from our heart, like you said, the growth heart set. And then from that will come the questions and the curiosity and the true listening and love that you're talking about.
Awesome. And there is a fine line, like be curious, but don't be rude, right? Like, especially for our trans brothers and sisters, there is something in non-conforming. There is something called Trans 101. Like, there are certain things that are just off limits, right? And you have to do your own research, and you have to go, if you're curious about something, go in and Google it. Like I said, go to YouTube. You'll find somebody who maybe is talking about it, but maybe in a personal conversation, it's not appropriate to ask certain questions. So if you want to work with the trans community, my master's thesis was with the trans community, and because I identify as gender nonconforming and trans at times, I really wanted to explore and be curious about the community. And there is a vernacular. There are things that you have to know before you really try to engage with certain communities and understand what that level of 101 is. So you're not asking, really like bad questions, to be honest with you. Educate yourself. It is our responsibility to educate ourselves and to seek education for minority groups that we don't belong to. And so this lens could be across all of the intersectionalities, whether it's race, religion, any identity like sexuality, gender. So it's all there. Seek education first and get a base knowledge, and then have your close allyship as well. And I have to tell you, I even have a close allyship where I go, okay, this is starting to bubble up. Where am I? Am I a growth mindset right now? Or am I fixed mindset? How do we adjust? How do we be agile? How do we pivot? Like, bring me the research. I think we're at a research institution, so we love to go in to find peer reviewed journal articles. So keep educating yourself, even if it's going to YouTube. And then share stories of others.
Yes. So for this, I think, Dr. Gary, humans are natural storytellers. Just like we're naturally using those nonverbal and verbal cues, and we have ways of communicating, we also are storytellers. And a story sometimes is the way to get somebody to understand. That's just really often how we do it. If we think about all kinds of ways that we've shared stories over the years, sometimes through religious texts, sometimes through stories, sometimes through books, we remember stories. So if you have a story, that's what we do.
That's right. Thank you. And Jazz brothers are great storytellers. I mean, we just saw this video. They're wonderful, but they have permission and agency to share her story. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to share stories of others, just make sure that you have that permission to do so. And, I love Dr. Maggie shared about her son, but that was not my place to really share that story, right? So I give agency and let Dr. Broderick speak about Andy when she wants to or comfortable in that conversation. But I don't go around sharing that story. I always have to make sure that I have permission to be able to share somebody's story. And that's a great point of allyship. If you don't belong to a community and you want to share a story, just make sure that you're partnering with somebody, bringing them to the table, bringing them in the room, and make sure that you're using their permission before you do so. Speaking about stories, let's put this into action. So we're going to do some interactive modeling in action, and this is where we're going to go to Mentimeter. So we're going to do two scenarios. I'm going to do one, and then Dr. Broderick's going to do another. Mine is a little bit more business, and Dr. Broderick's is a little bit more educational. So let's start out with scenario one. So your boss has called a Zoom meeting to discuss important business. All of the team members join in quickly, and your boss is the last to jump in always, right? So everyone's sitting there on Zoom. As the boss is taking roll call, the boss calls on your colleague, Kelly. The boss says, oh, look at this, Kelly, you're a they, them now. Should we go around the Zoom room and share our pronouns since he put his next to his name? Oh man, that's right. I need to get better at this. I know this gender thing is so new. Anyway, I called the meeting because we need to discuss this business. In the interim, Kelly stopped sharing their video. Where did Kelly go? Where did Kelly go? The boss yells. We need him in this discussion. Kelly comes back on Zoom with an entirely shift in the demeanor. So throughout the call, your boss and colleagues continuously misgender Kelly by using he, him pronouns, and you observe that Kelly's self-esteem continues to fade. You know Kelly is that bright energy, like brightens the room, even a Zoom room. And then additionally, Kelly's always a bright smile turns into a frown, and the Zoom is very uncomfortable for the rest of the meeting, and your boss just ends the meeting as if nothing were happening. So what would you do as an ally? How would you handle this situation? And we're going to go over to Mentimeter. But before we click the next slide, I know I went through that scenario a little bit fast. But if anybody needs a little bit more time, I'm going to stall like another 10 seconds. Awesome. Let's just put this in action and see how it goes. So we're going to head over to Mentimeter. And if you hold your phone up, you can do the QR code right there on your phone. It'll take you, thank you, great demonstration. Dr. Broderick, if you get the QR code, it'll take you over to Mentimeter. If you want to go by your computer, just use this URL code, and then we'll head over to Mentimeter. Okay, Em is going to be there to help you if you have any questions. So I'm going to head on over. Just let me minimize this. I'm in oh, it's already happening. Even better. Awesome. So 4 would jump in and correct the boss and colleagues on the spot. Oh, interesting. Wait until the Zoom is over. Okay, yes. And call your boss afterwards. Good. That's great allyship. Wait until the Zoom is over and call Gary as soon as possible and tell them to be patient with the change. Okay, very good. So there's 32 people on the webinar I could see. So let's give it a little bit more time. Think that through. So basically the scenario, we're in a Zoom room. Your boss is not using the correct pronouns. This is a new thing for Kelly to explore. Okay, 2, wait until the Zoom is over. And so we are going to have a little roundtable at the end, but just this is my scenario, and it hits home and very personal for me. But 8 of you would jump in and correct the boss, and I say, "Whoa, allies! You are so brave." That is your boss, and you are confronting them. And sometimes it can be uncomfortable to correct somebody in a Zoom room. In our culture, I think we've been taught, pull somebody to the side, don't embarrass them. So this is interesting. I think it's great. There are no wrong answers or correct answers here. It's just level of allyship, right? And 2 people said, wait until the Zoom is over and call your boss. Very interesting. That I like that one as well, like have that conversation with the boss and perhaps, share one of the webinars that Dr. Broderick and I have done with them. That would be a good resource. So always have some resources in your Rolodex that you also can share out. And then the last 2, wait until the Zoom is over and call Gary as soon as possible and tell him that to be patient. Okay, this one is interesting. I think the be patient is the one that kind of throws, a wrench in it for me, because it's like, well, I that's the way I identify. I understand I have to give patience. That was the first Zoom. So I think that could be some sound advice. But look at the tiers here, and it's to your comfortability level. And the third one, the red bar, you're really there for Gary. So I kind of like that support system that I didn't change the name to Kelly. So you could see exactly how personal this is.
It's personal. Yes.
Yeah. So
yes,
thank you all for that support. And I really love it. And I would love to go back to go out of here. We will go to the PowerPoint presentation. And then let's move to scenario 2 and take it away, Dr. Broderick.
Thanks, Dr. Gary. So I think about this a lot because I've worked a lot with K-12 teachers, and I did teach K-12 back in the 90s, but I've worked a lot in K-12 schools, and I have kids. I have a high schooler and a college student and almost middle schooler. So in this scenario, you're a high school English teacher, and the kids, your students, tend to open up to you and they find you approachable. You are always happy to be there for them, no matter what, for all things. And your 9th grade student, Kai, comes to see you after class and opens up to you about his feelings. Kai has always felt that he is gay, but he's afraid of what his parents will say. The parents haven't been kind about LGBTQIA plus issues, and they see them in the media. They make jokes and they say they don't accept things like that. So Kai is in a rough spot. So just like you always do for your students, you listen to Kai's feelings and perspective, and you let him know that you are always there for him as a caring adult, which is definitely good, right? And compassionate and empathetic. Kai says he's happy he came out to you because he trusts you. You're not sure what to do next. How can you help Kai as time goes on? Just like you always want to help all of your students. So what would you do? We'll head back over to see about this one.
I'll give you a little bit, 10 seconds as I go to Mentimeter, just so you can get that last little, if you are reading, then that would be great. Okay, awesome. And then boom. Let's go back to Mentimeter. It's the same QR, and the same codes. So let's see, if we're ready, I'll go back out and let's go back to Mentimeter. And it should pop up on your phone now. Ooh, okay.
Yeah, this is the other, that should be the next slide.
Yeah, let me go back. All right, here we go. Slide 2.
There we go,
Then we
yeah.
hit present. There we go. Now you can see it. Let's see, any takers out there? Dr. Broderick,
Everybody wants to be a high school teacher.
There we go.
You know, we all want to be a high school teacher right now, right? During COVID, during all the stressful times, the budget cuts. But I think there are amazing teachers out there. So I
wow,
support
so
them
the
completely.
center column, what was that one again?
Look at that. Keep providing Kai resources on Kai's timeline. I think this one's really, really interesting, Dr. Gary, because you did ask me to design this in a particular way. I think you're sort of an assessment expert on this, because you told me to put in some things that might be obviously problematic, and I did. And so I think our audience is extremely wise in seeing that that was what you did in their assessment techniques, Dr. Gary's. Pretty good there. So we can see how, and I understand a teacher would want to call parents. I called parents as a teacher and emailed and texted and all that stuff. But you can see why that's problematic, right? So you may want to have open communication, and that's a good thing with parents usually. But do you see why it's problematic? We can talk about that in our Q&A a little bit later. You can see why that would be a real issue. Talking about teachers in the faculty lounge, interesting. Dr. Gary and I had a great conversation about this. Sometimes talking to colleagues is a great idea if you are able to be confidential with information, right? And say, hey, I need to talk to you about a situation with a student, but maybe not this student. Could be smart to get advice and talk, but in a very confidential and caring way. And then in the middle, there's your number one advice, because Dr. Gary, again, assessment expert that they are, told me to put a really good answer on there. So keep providing Kai resources on Kai's timeline. Definitely a winner. Some combination of things is probably good. I would have a trusted teacher that I would talk to in a confidential way, and I would provide resources and just be open and still being that caring teacher. So let's talk about that more when we go into the Q&A, Dr. Gary. That's awesome stuff.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. And, the next section is, why do we need allyship, right? So I just always root our conversations, our papers, our scholarly lit reviews in the literature. So here is some literature that I wanted to pull out from Samuel's 2020. And it talks just about how the pandemic has certainly affected our community. And as you can see, they just use LGBTQ++, but again, they're calling in all of us into this conversation. And as you can see that many of them are struggling. They're struggling with social connectedness. And I think Pride is back on this year, so yay, Pride, but there's still a pandemic going on. So I've heard from many friends that are like, I'm not going, like I'm still, not in that space, and we respect that. So reach out, make sure that, you're connecting. Also, the other piece of the data is that they are feeling neglected and suffering, and that they will die in silence. And it goes back to what Dr. Broderick was saying. It kind of paralleled me back to, the AIDS epidemic. Like, this is still a pandemic that we're living through, and it's impacting different communities differently, but it's certainly hitting ours very, very hard. And so ongoing training, and again, I'm taking more of a business perspective, and Dr. Broderick will take the education perspective. So ongoing training, this is great for safe zone. Safe zone training, this is a free safe zone training from the Safe Zone Project. And it is a free modular that you can go through courses. It's going to talk about LGBTQIAA++ terms and concepts. You can see what it's going to do for you, and you can get certified, which I think is amazing. And then you get that sticker right there. That's the Safe Zone Project. So this is a wonderful way to really make sure that you have that safe zone space, that you can be an ally where somebody can come speak to you about things all do queer. And then the next one that we'll go over is the ongoing training for education.
Thanks, Dr. Gary. My son actually shared this with me. We were on a road trip this past weekend, and I was talking to him about the presentation here with Dr. Gary. And again, my son is a transgender male and about 20 years old. And he knows a lot more about some things than I do. And I have to say, as a growth mindset person, I'm grateful. I'm grateful when he shares these things with me. And he said that GLSEN provides these resources. You can order a poster, stickers, other things, and you can also get a free Zoom background on GLSEN on the website to show that you are a safe space, that you are an ally, to just give that message. We talk about that in our other webinar, how we put things in our signatures, how we put she, her, or they, them, or he, his, or whatever we want to in our Zoom room, and different things in our signatures of emails, just to say safe space. I'm a trusted person. I want to help. I want to support. This is a way you can do that. And it can be done in a variety of places, not just classrooms. You could put this, if you're a healthcare worker or something like that, a safe space denotation of some sort is a really smart thing to do.
So thank you. And that is your homework, right? So again, this is just keep that ongoing training happening and can continue to support. And here's why. So I'll end with this, the why safe spaces matter, why they are needed. Here are some facts from the human rights. And you could read through these, but 4 in 10 LGBTQ youth, 42%, say the community in which they live is not accepting of LGBT people. I mean, we go back to, don't say a gay bill, or to the Texas anti-trans law. So this doesn't really surprise me as we look around the country. And over 77% of the youth say they know things will get better. That gives me hope. And I'm a hopeful person. And I'm hopeful that, we will continue to bring allies into the conversation, bring allies over to really have a growth mindset to help us to go through these trainings. And you may save a life. You may not even know that you save a life, just to have that support for this community. So thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Broderick, for doing this with me. I'm going to say thank you and enjoy LGBTQIA++ Pride this month, June. Get back out there and celebrate. There is hope. Grab a friend, take them with you. It is recruiting season. June is our recruiting season. So I am recruiting you. I want you to recruit somebody. As many allies as we can get, we will continue just to bring them into the acronym. And thank you so much, Emily. I'm going to bring you back into the conversation. I would love to get the discussion going and make time for that. And then one more survey on, we had such a great outpour and I loved it. Like, people wanted to get involved with this webinar and say, hey, do it this way or do it that way, or look at it differently this way. And we loved it. We were like, oh my gosh, let's have a roundtable. And so we want to put a call to action out there for any scholars out there, any faculty members out there that want to come and help us do webinars and really see from a different lens. Come on in. So Em, I'm going to kick it back to you. I see there's some questions.
Absolutely. Couple of things. Love this. Love it. I just donated to GLSEN this week. Couple of questions about, let me ask you this. And Dr. Gary, this is something that you were mentioning about with the gender pronouns, and when some students, like as an example, were using sir. Before you were a doctor, what would you have preferred students refer to you as other than sir if they were trying to show respect?
Yeah, you know what? I love that question. Thank you for it. And I'm laughing because it actually kept me on track to speed me up to get my PhD. But yes, I was in the classroom, in life in general. I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I understood that frame. But to be honest with you, I don't know how old you think I am, but they just recently started using sir with me. But no, just kidding. So if somebody did that, I would just say, you could eliminate that and just call me Gary or call me something different. But if it is my last name, then they can say mix. And so it's an MX. So the R and the S switch to an X. So it's MX or, for both Ms. and Mr. And married Mrs. With the R and the S, Mrs. That's the only one that changes, right? Because of gender. But again, just MX. If you were, you can Google as well. I think in a letter, we just eliminate it. And so I hope that answers your question. But X kind of is the default, right? So Latinx, so Latin X, I've heard Latinx. So whenever you want to make something gender neutral, you can just kind of find that X to make it more gender nonconforming.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gary. Someone mentions it's the MX for me. I love it.
Okay.
Okay, so as a person of color from observation, identifying as an ally of the LGBTQIA plus is still considered taboo, particularly for men of color. How can I help remove that stigma and help people with my community understanding it's okay to support individuals within the LGBTQIA plus without directly identifying as necessarily being a part of the acronym? What are your thoughts on that? This question came up in the very beginning, and I really do feel like your presentation gave light to different things that you can do, but is there anything else that you'd like to expand on that?
I again would just go back to, telling stories or experiences that I have not been personally involved with. People see race first and they see, still that I am a white male. And then you'll unpack from there. Race is definitely the first thing that we see. And the only context I can give is I'll give a shout out to my husband. So this is Jason and I was looking in my office for a picture. I don't know if you could see it, but that's Jason and I. And, I have had many conversations with Jason about exactly this question. And I would say that I have the luxury of having those conversations with him. If you can find somebody who you can become close with or seek somebody who's coming from that experience, I think that would probably be the best way to handle that.
I agree. I would add it depends on the context. I mean, you choose your battles, and I don't want to think of it as a battle. I want to think of it as love. I'm a lover, not a fighter. I choose love always. But there are going to be times when things are a little bit more reasonable to approach, and then you can push a little bit further. And there are times when it's going to be completely out of left field. And we just kind of feel those situations out and feel out the culture of a place. I often will think of sort of, situations in church. My children went to Catholic school, for example, and there were people in the Catholic parish and in the Catholic school who were more like me and were more like an ally, and there were those who were not. And I could say certain things to the certain group and certain things to the other group, and I had to know that. I had to just get that feel, and then if I felt like I was moving things too far, I would know it. So it's a lot of self-reflection and a lot of kind of like inner work to understand when can you move the needle forward and when will it be more detrimental to do so, right? So it's a little bit nuanced.
Thank you so much, Dr. Broderick. Couple people have posted, thank you so much for this great webinar. I want to make sure that we're able to tap into the future pieces. So if anyone has their cell phone available, we would really love to get your ideas about the next piece. What letter of the acronym, right? Dr. Gary, is that where we're going?
Oh, I think it's great. Yes. And it all stems from, I'll give a little background context, right? Like we had a great outpouring, like private emails, some comments posts. I've had faculty reach out to me and just really calling in, right? Like calling in, hey, like, let's talk about this let's talk about the title you had. I understood it more after I read the description, but there was was some nuanced conversations that happened with the title that I had. And, the thing is that I own it. And I think we had a round table, we owned it, and we quickly adjusted. And not only adjusted, I don't like that, but we grew. And I grew as well to be more inclusive. That is my MO, right? And I slept on it. We had lots of discussions, and we separated the AA for this. Just you have the double A, you have the double Q, and we're like, wait, let's really call in these scholars and faculty members. And by the way, on the Commons, we do have an LGBTQIA plus allies group that you can join and come see us, be part of that. And we have roundtables and discussions. So let's go to Mentimeter. Let's see if anyone's in there answering this question. But yeah, what letters could we unpack? I've already done some trans work, but we can still, let me see. I think I gave an area where you could write. So
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you would like to see, you can pop in the letter.
Pop in the letter.
Or
Word, anything, or just any kind of feedback. Yeah.
So queer or questioning, that's a double meaning nuanced letter as well.
B, we've got B there. Yeah.
Okay, yes, bisexuality. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And an I.
Okay.
Intersex, great. There's TikTok is my friend too. By the way, there's yin and yang for all social media, and I love TikTok. Two-Spirit, absolutely. In my master's thesis, I talk about Two-Spirit, and I also talk about Mahueni from the Hawaiian perspective. But before colonization, there were multiple genders and multiple cultures. So the G, gay. What was really fun too? Questioning, awesome. Is Dr. Broderick and I had some really great questions around the order of the letters in the acronym.
Yes.
I mean, that was very interesting, and we talked about that, and we've had some great conversations, queer, absolutely queer, over the overarching blanket. I'm sure that this is being recorded, so we'll be able to see these, but you also can reach out to us, gay. We are in the Commons, so you can find us in the Commons if you want to send us a message, or people have found our emails through the Commons, so you can really reach out to us and be involved. We'd like to do this more than just in June, so maybe there's opportunities. And also, we have a new, Dr. Broderick, I'll let you talk about ARC. I mean, this is something that's really great too, is where you'll be spearheading a whole new resource center.
We are working on something brand new. Just like we talk about growth mindset, we're growing some new things. So it's just in the very beginning stages, but we are starting a new scholarly community to help people with presentations and publications, particularly alumni, but it could be students, faculty, really anyone. And it's not just the School of Education. And so I talked with Dr. Gary because honestly, Dr. Gary's done a lot of presentations on these sorts of issues. Maybe you're an expert on something in particular, and you want help in publishing or presenting in a scholarly journal or in a scholarly conference on that topic. And so we're hoping to really be a guiding force for people at ARC, which is going to be the Advanced Research Center.
Wonderful. And while you are going back to the reference portion, just want to make sure we have those two slides we're able to show.
As I go to the I go to the references, here's the suicide prevention. I think it's as allies and in the community, we always need to know about suicide prevention and how to handle these situations. Or if you feel like, okay, I'm heavy with what I'm seeing or hearing, this is always a great resource. And I always have to show this one just to prevent, suicides. And then we'll go to
just one more comment here from someone I know, Chelsea Young. She mentioned Mentimeter was giving her trouble at the time, but she was Googling the ally flag. So maybe another idea for a potential webinar is just awareness of the different kinds of flags. which I think is a great comment. Thank you so much for that.
Did you say Chelsea Young?
Yes.
Oh, Chelsea VP. So I have to mention something. Thank you, Chelsea, for that. There are many, many flags. And I just want to say that the webinar series actually was sparked by Chelsea. And Chelsea, oh, I'll get teary-eyed here. But Chelsea, approached me after meeting me at an event about almost 5 years ago, as I was a student, and said, hey, listen, I really want this growth mindset for the university. Would you be willing to do some webinars? And I said, absolutely. And we got such a great response that here we are, 4 years in. Next year will be the 5th annual. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for attending. And I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I do want to thank our attendees for your questions and engaging in our presentation and being here working on your growth as an ally or any member of the LGBTQIA++ community. We appreciate you and we are celebrating you this month. And as Dr. Gary and Dr. Broderick mentioned, every month to come. So this webinar is recorded. We are going to post it in the CTL Webinars LibGuides page. And I am going to send an email to all of our attendees with a recording of this webinar as well too. And one more tiny slice, I'd like to thank Michael Lynch in the Center for Teaching and Learning. Thank you so much for your work on the PowerPoint, and we appreciate you. So with that being said, I would like to have everyone have a wonderful rest of your month, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Pride.